Hello and very warm welcome to all of you in this edition of Public Forum. I'm Anurag Punetha with you. The Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or we call it Quad, has gained a strength in the face of an aggressive China, as we know that. The four countries are also concerned about the global supply chain problems. So what does it mean, the Quad meeting? Will it send a signal to aggressive China, and would it deter China or not? We are going to discuss in this edition of Public Forum. And joining me for the discussion, Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, international affairs expert. A very warm welcome to the show, Dr. Chaulia. As Dr. Jaishankar has said, do you believe that the foreign ministers meeting at least would be able to send a kind of a signal to China about the resoluteness of this Quad, or somehow would deter China or not?
Yes, Anurag, I think ministerials are a new affair because Quad, the idea has existed before. It used to be discussed at a lower level. In fact, it was initially floated way back in 2007 by the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. But it's only after 2017 that we have really activated it. And last year, 2019, we even did a ministerial level, higher than the bureaucratic level. So the only thing that we have not seen is a kind of a heads of state level meeting of just the Quad as a specific grouping. That has not happened. But otherwise, we are showing greater seriousness and intent now. Like you said, the Chinese behavior as well as the power has expanded enormously in front of our own eyes in the last few years. So Quad as an idea, if you go back 2007 to now, it was ahead of its time at that time when it was launched first, and then it went into a deep freeze, totally dormant, and then reactivated. But now is the right time, and better late than never, because we do need a counterbalancing coalition of sorts, if not a tight formal alliance. I mean, some people have been arguing that the US Deputy Secretary of State, Stephen Biegun, has suggested that Quad should ultimately formalize and become an Asian NATO. Or something like that. I don't think that we have yet reached a consensus on how that can be done. But I think slowly we are moving in that direction, because the maritime cooperation is a very central pillar of the Quad discussions today. And also, like you said, the global supply chains, because after coronavirus, suddenly all the countries in the region have felt like they are over-dependent and over-reliant on China, and it can hold them to ransom. By exploiting this asymmetric advantage it has as the factory of the world. So now Japan, which is a key member, Australia, and of course the US, all of them are looking to divest away from China and to look for alternative sources for manufacturing, and they are also incentivizing other countries in the region. So India hopes to be a beneficiary of that. With our Make in India and our Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have a component of attracting more foreign investment to manufacture here in India. So we will be hopeful that these countries together, even geographically, Anurag, if you look at it, Japan, Australia, India, and the US, which is, of course, they call it a resident power in the Pacific. They have got a Indo-Pacific command. These four are like flanking the Chinese maritime space, and if these four come together, they can check the expansion. Even with the LAC crisis, Anurag, people may have noticed, India activated our oceanic response also. We put out more battleships and submarines in the Indian Ocean region to send the Chinese a message that even if the tussle is going on land in the Himalayas, we know that ultimately the Chinese plan for expansion and what they call the zone of the warfare is going to be maritime and in the waters. So Indo-Pacific Quad is the central formation. We would like to also expand it eventually. There is a talk of a Quad plus involving Vietnam and Indonesia, South Korea. There's also talk of other players like Canada, Germany, France, which are not part of Quad, but also have an interest and apparently are being brought in. Russia is not there in the Quad, but we would like more and more players to come in. So Quad can be the basis for it. So definitely the ministerial is a message to the Chinese. The Chinese already rattled a little bit. They are saying we don't pose any threat to anyone. Why are the Americans bringing everyone together like this? But that's the cardinal mistake. Is not the Americans bringing it. Every one of the four Quad members has its own self-interest and national interest right now to come together in this formation and to form a countervailing force to the Chinese hegemony. Is not the US agenda here. In fact, the US under Trump has not been always very consistent about this. In fact, Japan has been much more consistent. Now Australia, if it comes in fully, as it has done under Scott Morrison, under Prime Minister Modi, we are now showing more proactiveness towards forming these loose coalitions. So I think it's coming together. It's a construct. It is not yet an alliance, but it's on its way. And the Chinese should beware, because they have annoyed everybody and created the way, they paved the way for these kind of formations to come
But
about.
okay, but you talked about, let's say, the Prime Minister Morrison of Australia, or the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe. Due to some political changes in both Japan, and probably that change may happen in United States, does it face some minor headwinds to the Quad? Because people are also believing that Shinzo Abe was the major proponent of this multilateral initiative. We are talking about the Quad. But his sudden resignation somehow has dented the initiative.
I don't think so, Anurag, because Yoshihide Suga, his successor, the current Japanese Prime Minister, in fact, wanted to host the Quad ministerial in Tokyo.
Okay.
It was initially scheduled to be held in Delhi, but the Japanese wanted it to be held there. And that itself is a signal that the Japanese want continuity. And in fact, Yoshihide Suga needs to consolidate his position in Japan as a politician also, because he was mostly in the shadows under Shinzo Abe, and now he has become the prime minister. So he needs more, visibility on the foreign front. And so he's showing that actually he may actually be equally, if not more, nationalistic in pushing back the Chinese, shadow around the East China Sea and the Sea of Japan. So, and as far as the US goes, yes, suppose Trump loses and suppose Joe Biden wins, then also, in fact, the pressure will increase, because Biden believes in building coalitions and bringing allies together much more than Trump. So on that front, the containment of China, whatever we want to call it, if we don't want to use a Cold War language, let us call it a soft balancing of China. Whatever it is, I think the die is cast, because the Chinese, through their actions, are earning this. Because earlier, 10 years ago, there was no momentum for Quad. Because at the time, the Chinese were not being, so bullying in their attitudes. They were still hiding their time, biding the time. But under Xi Jinping, they are trying to push the boundaries, trying to assert power and authority and control the ocean, as they say it. You have to control both the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. Throughout the Americans, push back the Indians, and this becomes a giant Chinese lake. Because if that is their approach, the Quad has to happen. So I think this has an unstoppable momentum now. It's only a question of how brave each member is to be able to shed all inhibitions and come forward in a more forthright manner with new proposals, new ideas, so that the jointness or the interoperability, especially at the military level, expands.
Okay, so the Quad is more likely to become what we say a platform that can take on somehow the China's assertiveness, China's bullying tactics and behavior, especially in this part of the region. And probably this behavior is the glue that holds the Quad countries together and will somehow force China to mend its ways. We are going to take a short break, Dr. Chaulia. We will come back, and one more guest, Mr. Ninad Seth, will join us in the discussion as well. Dr. Chaulia, Ninad has said that probably the institutionalizing Quad will somehow be far more effective. But I am asking you the question about India's response so far, about the China's overall attitude since last couple of months. Chief of the Army Staff, General Narwane, and the Foreign Secretary has visited Myanmar. And India is ready to sign or to invest in Myanmar. And in fact, for the first time in Indian history, US long-range maritime patrol aircraft refueled at the India's Andaman and Nicobar Island, the P-8 Poseidon aircraft. Does this kind of, tactics, or let's say the steps, will send a signal to country like China?
Well, the Andamans are very important, because if you see geographically, the Andamans sit right on the mouth to the Malacca Straits. And the China, 80% of China's energy imports pass through the Straits of Malacca. So we have a kind of like a, real fixed aircraft carrier permanently there. That is what the Andamans are. And we have Tri-Services Command there. So they are very active now in as part of our Indo-Pacific strategy. But I do agree with Ninad that, our spending has to rise significantly. I mean, it's only after the LAC clash in Galwan in June that suddenly, we have now fast-forwarded acquisitions for hardware and such things. So defense expenditure, we need to put more money where the mouth is. But I think overall, the oceanic zones, the sea lanes of communications, is where China is more vulnerable. From Hu Jintao onwards, they've been talking about the Malacca dilemma. The Belt and Road Initiative, if you look at it one way of China, is a way to break out of the Malacca dilemma and to find alternative routes. So those crucial choke points, as they are called, geopolitical choke points, is where we should concentrate. And I think the Quad, when they say we are doing regional consultations, surely at the level of the militaries, and if the Malabar exercises, if we can bring Australia back on board and do quadrilateral military exercises, which have not happened for some time, those will, convey. But also, see, the Malabar happens only a one-off thing, for a short duration of time, once a year or so. But how about doing patrolling and joint interoperability through more agreements at the level of Quad itself, where all four countries can use the basis of any one of the member states. You see, we have not reached that level of. So, for example, with Japan, we have signed now the basing rights agreement. With the US, we've got. With Australia, Australia has got a permanent US presence in Darwin on the north of Australia, looking up towards China. But the point is, Taiwan needs to be brought into the picture. There is Vietnam, there is Indonesia, which is very, very critical for the Malacca Straits. So all these players, if we can, start moving in the direction. Yes, it is right. Dr. Jayashankar's recent book, India Way, he was saying, alliances have all diminished now. Nobody is really for solidly on one camp against another camp. And we have to do this multi-alignment and all that, which is fine. We do need multiple players. It's not only the US. We need other 3 Quad members and Quad plus members. But at some point, only soft balancing may not be enough to deter China. Okay. So we have to move in a direction that shows really a kind of alliance-like behavior. You see, we are shy of alliances. The other two, Japan and Australia, are treaty allies of the US, for a very long time, for decades. We are not a treaty ally. We say that we are a comprehensive global strategic partner, because we prize our independence, because the backlog of the strategic autonomy and all those ideas. Okay. But nonetheless, we can operate with the other two, right? This is not just a bilateral US-India. So we should be less hesitant. We should take more risks, as Dr. Jayashankar has been advocating. And I'm sure Prime Minister understands this, because, see, at the end of the day, our asymmetry with China is there. And we cannot match them one-on-one in the maritime domain beyond Indian Ocean. If we have to go further east, if we have to really contain them and put them back where they belong, we do need partnerships. So I think that is where the plurilateral agreements or arrangements like Quad, if they become alliance-like as we move forward with boldness of vision by all the leaders, that is when the Chinese will start feeling the pressure. Because right now they still feel like they only have to contend with the US in the Western Pacific. And they think that, ultimately they can take Taiwan, the US cannot do anything about it. That's right. So I think we need to move in a direction where there's this jointness, as it is called in the military jargon. Jointness and interoperability are the key. And of course, the commercial initiative, the infrastructure plans also very critical on RUG. Japan has put up an infrastructure plan for the whole region for connecting Asia and Africa, partnership for quality infrastructure. Prime Minister has his own disaster resilient infrastructure idea. And the Americans say that they have this blue dot initiative for certifying infrastructure. That's another important thing, because the Chinese have gained a lot of influence in ASEAN and some of the poorer countries of these Pacific Island nations by dangling money for infrastructure. I mean, so Chinese are maneuvering with the game of offering counter-offering to small countries infrastructure initiatives, so that the Chinese dragon, the shadow, can slowly be pushed away. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Chaulia. Thank you very much, Ninad, for joining me and talking to me. That's all we have in this edition of Public Forum. Thank you very much for watching.